Welcome everyone to 30 What Now? This is your host Melissa Tan, and if you can't tell, yes, my voice is husky and dusky, and that's because I'm sick. But I thought for the purposes of content creation, what is more important than quality? Consistency. Like, I am probably gonna be releasing this episode later than my once a month frequency as is. So, the best I can do right now is record this even though I'm sick. But hopefully this is going to be an episode that resonates with a lot of you. And if it doesn't resonate with you now, it might resonate with you in the future. And that's to do with immigrant child guilt. So, in a world like we're at the age where our parents are aging or they're getting sick, and it's really hard if you're an immigrant and you have your family, your parents living in another country. That sort of guilt, I think, hits you so hard, especially when you know they've sacrificed a big chunk of your life just so that you can obtain the sort of life that they envision you to obtain. And, even though you do your best and you achieve all the goals and, you obtain all the accolades that your parents never dreamed of, somehow you feel like you're kind of failing them because you maybe didn't visit them enough or you don't spend enough time with them. So if you are an immigrant child, or if you are a child that lives far away from your family, your parents, like that may be interstate, so it's like 4 hours of driving in Australia, let's talk about it. If you are an avid listener of this podcast, you know that I have spoken about this a couple times with different friends, and that's because it's something that is clearly on my mind, right? As immigrant children, or maybe even if you're in a family where it's important to, you might have heard this over and over again. We are, like parents would say, we are sacrificing our lives so that you can be successful. So when you're older, don't forget to take care of us. I'm sure a lot of us have heard this before. And then, it's everyone. I bet everyone had that intention that they will do it. Like when my parents are older, I'll do everything within my power to take care of them. But then life happens. For some, it might be the cost of living is too high to actually contribute to your parents' livelihood. It might be your own children is taking up your life, and so you have to navigate taking care of your parents and your child. Like, I'm not there yet, but I know that that's probably something that could happen to me in the future. But as of right now, as the bright young age of 33, for me, my current problem is that my parents, and as well a lot of children who have sent their kids away in a different country, they wanted us to have a better life. So they found a way for me and my brother to live in Australia, have our life in Australia. And, they've encouraged us to build our life here because maybe life in Malaysia isn't just the life that they wanted to envision for us. And, now all of a sudden, taking care of your parents seems like such an incredibly impossible, if anything, irregular task. And I think for me, that's where the guilt begins. As an immigrant, I'm sure everyone understands what this feels like, but it feels like we're constantly living in two worlds, two lives. You're building your future in your own country, in your current country, but then your heart, your base, some might say your soul, your family, your history is in another. So you kind of feel guilty when you're away too long, and you're guilty when you're away too long. It kind of goes both ways. Like if you're in your home country, you're like, there's so many things that I should be doing to solidify my future here in your future country, like for me, Australia. And then when you're in your future, your current country, in your future, you're like, there's so many more things that I would want to do with my family back home. So you feel guilty when you visit, and then you feel guilty when you have to leave. And you feel guilty that you're happy that you're building your life here because, at some point you realize whatever you're doing now, your parents are aging without you. And then you look across the pond and you see your friends who might be living the same country as their parents, and you can see that obviously they get to spend more time and live a very different life to you in comparison to you. Actually, even when I compare, how my partner lives, how my partner deals with his family, the fact that he gets to see them every week is just something that I definitely am very jealous of. And then, something happens. Maybe it's a health scare, a fall, or a stroke. And then all of a sudden, the guilt takes on the guilt becomes even stronger. Suddenly, everything stops and nothing else matters. It doesn't matter if you've got a project that it doesn't matter if your work has urgent matters, like your family matters. It doesn't matter if you have goals that you kind of want to hit whilst you're in, the current country you're in. It doesn't matter if you have, events or invitation from other friends. All of a sudden, everything just loses its importance, and the most important thing to you is to get to your family. Somehow you might replay every decision. You might wonder if, being away for too long or being away just kind of means that you're selfish. And then I've asked my parents this, and then they're like, no, you are allowed to have your own life, and distance doesn't mean you don't love them. As long as you obviously keep in contact with them, they understand. So in case you haven't gathered, something happened, in my family. My dad had a mini stroke, and I said mini not because it's fun or anything. I said mini because he did have a big stroke in 2020, and that's the type of stroke that you can see physically. His movement was slower, his speech was slower. Whereas this one, it's a bit different. It's just maybe mentally he is a little slower, but you actually wouldn't be able to tell if you were to look at him physically. And so we're very thankful for that. But a mini stroke oftentimes is a sort of warning sign of if you don't change your life, something bad, something worse is about to happen. So the minute that me and my brother found out about this, we kind of went straight into planning mode. We went to check whether we can leave work, whether how long can we leave work for, what do we need to take care of back here in Australia before we are able to return to Malaysia to support our family. So I was able to, fortunately enough, stay for a week, whilst my brother, who is currently still there now, will be there to close to a month. And funnily enough, I was thinking of actually filming this episode whilst I was there, but I don't know if you've ever been to Malaysia, but whenever you're in a really hot country, you tend to get really lazy. And I don't think I was in the right frame of mind to do this, even though I wanted to. I wanted to kind of record kind of how I feel in the moment when I realized that my parents are human or frailer than they once were. Me and Erin, we've spoken about this in the past. I think when you're younger, you kind of see your parents as this superhero that you look up to, and now sometimes it feels like we're the ones taking care of them. During this period when I'm back, I was there talking to my parents about lifestyle changes, and then my brother's busy thinking about what can we do in the house to prevent any further incidents. What can we do to ensure that they don't fall down or anything like that. Or in, every little consideration, things that we're doing is to kind of, in a way, our way of showing them, yes, we still love you, we still care for you, even though we can't be here all the time. And, I think I feel like sometimes my brain tells me I really should be there all the time, but you can't, because the reality is, I am doing my best whilst I'm away. I go back quite often, and, I have to work. I have to, actually fund my life. Otherwise, I can't take care of them. But the other reality is I'm actually very fortunate, or we are fortunate enough to live in a period where we might be able to see, if you are interstate or overseas, you might be able to see your parents more often than, previous generation. Previous generation, flight tickets were a lot more expensive, whereas now we get to see our parents maybe once a year. Whereas when my parents were, working at university, studying and then working overseas away from their parents, I remember they told me that sometimes they wouldn't even see their family once every 5 years, because that was during a time where, life was cheap, but luxuries were more expensive. So, and we are, I don't know if you recall, if you're someone that lived overseas from your family, back in the day, in order for you to call your family, you kind of need to buy these call cards. And you have to pay $30 for like 120 minutes. And funnily enough, I call them less now with my free FaceTime, instead of calling them more often. Sorry, let me rephrase that. I call them less now when I don't have to pay for call cards than I did. Oh, well, basically, I call them less even though I didn't have to pay for it. So that is something for me. I feel like I could do better. I could call them more often, given that I've got all these luxuries now. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is, we fortunately live in a time that all the sacrifices that our parents did might make it easier for me and like the rest of you to actually talk to your parents despite being millions, miles and miles away from your family. So, for everyone out there who might be facing the same conundrum, I've got 3 reframe, like trying to reframe your mind when it comes to guilt. 1, you are not abandoning your family, you are expanding your life. They didn't sacrifice, their own luxuries so that you can shrink your world. But just be mindful that, because you are able to now live your life, find smaller ways to showcase how you miss them and how you love them, and I'm sure they'll understand. 2, your love isn't measured by geography, it's measured by the consistency of your care. Again, it's whenever you've got the time, maybe you can go visit them, but if you can't visit them often, being able to send them messages or being able to call them often or talk to them properly when you've got the chance, do that consistently, and that showcases how much they are with you, despite the fact that they're not physically with you. 3rd, guilt isn't proof of you failing, but it's proof that you care. But we don't want that to be, we want to make sure that we don't use guilt as a driving force in how often we should see our family, but use that as a measurement, as a basis of, use that as a reminder of whenever you get the chance to talk to your family. So here are some of the practical ways that I've actually been, utilized to cope with my guilt, right? 1, frequent check-ins. I recall, back in the day when you had a call card, every second matters. So when you call your parents, you kind of have to talk about real things, like what's happened to your life, what are your problems, what can you do, all that. Whereas now, I feel like because I'm an adult, I don't always need that guidance. Sometimes I feel like calling them just feels, sometimes I thought, so in the past, I thought calling them just to be like, what are you doing? Oh, you're going to groceries, blah, blah. I thought that was a waste of time. But I've had a conversation with, if you listen to our conversation with Shilpa, that's actually enough, because when you are in the same room, that's what you do. Like, hey, what did you do? I'm nothing, just hang out with friends. Like, okay, cool. So nowadays, when I've got some time, even when I'm waiting for a train, I'll just give my parents a call to be like, hey, what you doing? Oh yeah, you're doing this? Cool, great, amazing. And that's it. It could be a 5-10 minute conversation. It doesn't have to be an in-depth conversation about life. 2, share the responsibility. I am lucky enough to not have to carry the privilege of taking care of my parents with my brother alone. Like me and my brother, we do share the responsibilities, and if anything, my brother would say I need to take up more of the responsibilities. But talk to your siblings, your neighbors, your other aunties and such. If you aren't able to take care of them from afar, see if there's anyone else from within that country that could help you with this responsibility. 3rd, make a care plan so that when something happens, you've got all the necessary information you need to help support your family. So medical contacts, emergency, finances. I think we're at a period of our life where you want to make sure you've got wills in place, or you want to talk about what happens if something bad happens that actually protects you and your family rather than it making it so dire. So that's something that me and my family have started thinking about given what's happened. Lastly, I guess, give yourself some compassion when you are navigating two worlds, two lives at once. It can be really daunting, and not everyone's going to understand unless you're an immigrant, unless you're in the same circumstance. Not everyone's going to understand how it feels. So give yourself some grace, because being a loving child can be difficult at times, even when you're, across the room. So imagine how much harder it would be if you're trying to love your parents from around the globe, no, from a totally different. I'm gonna say, it's hard for people to sometimes showcase their love when they're within a room with their parents, much less if they're thousands of kilometers away from their parents. So give yourself some compassion, because your parents understand what you have to go through in order to show that you care. So I guess this is my closing bit. It is a little shorter because that's the end of the episode. I tried to keep this episode a little shorter because my voice is dying. So I didn't want to yab too much. But if you're a child who's left home to go overseas, and you've built a life overseas, and you feel torn between your two worlds, I hope you know this. You're not a bad child. You're not ungrateful. You're not selfish. You are exactly where your parents want you to be. And you're allowed to build your life while still loving your parents deeply, even though that's from afar. I potentially one day I might re-record this when I'm not sounding croaky, but and I think things might be a little rushed, because again, my phone is dying, so if I'm trying to record this on my phone, I kind of need it to not die. But if this episode resonated with anyone, feel free to shoot me a message, or if you think that it might be worth someone else listening to this, feel free to share it to them. And yeah, I guess that's it. That's my short and sweet episode about my guilt. And I think it's probably also short and sweet because I've had time to think about it. I've had time to understand where that guilt is coming from and whether it is warranted. So yeah, I hope this is a good episode. Sorry for the croaky voice again. And what I was going to say, if you haven't followed to my YouTube or Spotify or Apple, please do so, and give me a rating, because that would help out with this episode, this podcast. I guess that's it. Thanks guys. Thanks all. Bye.